Hey, everybody. Before we start this podcast, you're in for a treat, by the way. It's amazing. And do you know what else is a treat? Hoist. Was that too on the nose, like the treat thing?
No, I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's on point.
Yeah, well, the flavors are amazing. They're always coming out with new stuff. And just like our community, they're always pushing the boundaries and being proactive and trying to take care of the people. So they start out with the liquids. Now they have the powders and they keep moving forward with the small pouches with the liquids and everything else like that. So they embody the spirit of the soft community and everything that we're all about and have a fantastic product. So, if you need a hydration source, like I do, an IV level hydration, go ahead and check out Hoist and use the codes OneReady. Let them know that we sent you and get yourself a sweet discount at the same time.
And then try and figure out what you're putting in your hair. You and Aaron have got the best hair. You must be using the Outer Regs pomade, Outer Regs with an S, that is, by the way. Yeah. So they've got the pipe hitter. They've got the dirty mic. I saw that you had posted to Mike Ritland the other day with the dirty mic. So then you got the original, and they've got beard and tattoo stuff. So if you're out there getting ink or you got a sweet, Jesus beard, then hit them up. Or if you've got better hair than me, definitely might want to use some of their products.
Yeah, you got called out for being out in the wild the other day, not wearing a hat on a podcast. It was nice. But yeah, Outer Regs, awesome. The owner is part of a community that we're associated with. I don't want to out him too much. Awesome dude, awesome products. Obviously down with the cause. Outer Regs with an S because we're not Gen Z nerds, and they just have the best products. I'm sorry, I can't help myself.
The promo code One's Ready though.
Yeah, let them know that you came from us and get yourself a discount. Enjoy this podcast. It's incredible, and I'm not worthy to be on it, but I am anyway. So yeah, gratitude always.
Always. All right. Enjoy.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. You're in the team room with myself, Peaches, and JK is back to continue on the story. I think we left out at the point where the story turns into a little bit of a tragedy, right? Is that when you became an officer, JK? Because to me, that's the saddest part of your entire story. So how, moving on from where we were last time, how did you become an officer? Like, what were the things you went through? These are the questions we get. Like, how'd you get there? Why'd you make that really great decision? And what was that experience like moving forward?
Well, I grew up through the ranks. I made Master Sergeant, put it on, and then my buddies told me I'm going over to the dark side. Right. But there was no web-based training at that time, so I was in the Southern Illinois program with Bud Gonzalez too, and who got commissioned after me. And we went every other weekend for 2 years trying to get that interspersed with temporary duty assignments. It was not the best way to do it, but we did get it done. And I built up the initial first 2 years of subjects through CLEP testing and through correspondence courses. We had a hodgepodge of stuff there. And of course, the education office helped out a little bit. So I had a 2-year degree, then I ended up getting a 4-year degree. But in those days, the Air Force allowed you to apply 6 months out, 4 to 6 months out of graduation, or as they call it, matriculation. And I had a high GPA, so I was accepted OTS. And I had a class date in September to December of 1980. So that's how I put that together.
And what was there like a selection process you had to go through to get back on team, or how did all that work out? And what was OTS like? Is generally speaking, going back and starting from day zero again, like you've done so many times before?
Well, because I was called a prior, as in prior service. So all the, there were about 20% of the class. I had a large class, like 265. So all the newbies said, well, you're a prior guy, so you know how to run the buffer. So I had a buffer detail for the first 6 weeks, and then I showed people, as we all did, all the newbies how to do things, even the elementary stuff, going back to, this is how you line your shoes and all that stuff. But in the upper, the last half of OTS, they give you a rank and you become a OT cadet officer, if you will. So I was an OT lieutenant colonel, group commander, because they organize in wing group squadrons. And So I had, they give you some management responsibilities and basically making sure everybody gets from A to B on time. And then the commissioned officers who were supervising the program, if they needed somebody to talk to about the latrines not being flushed or the floor not being buffed, they'd bring in the OT lieutenant colonel. That's how it was at OTS. And as far as the subjects, it was interesting. It was a professional officer program, and it was good. So I ended up graduating.
You know what they called you after that, though, Lieutenant. So,
well, I was a distinguished grad, and I knew how to march. But I went from an E7 down to 01, second lieutenant, and the Air Force did not have any provisions at that time to frock or directly commission people, as the Army did. Going from E6 or E7 direct to 03 captain. So I went through 2 years as second lieutenant and 2 years as first lieutenant. Did my time.
Yep.
And but the OTS was a good experience. Met a lot of people. Enjoyed it.
You're right. What was your first assignment after you got commissioned? So you're second lieutenant. I mean, the mindset I have to imagine from an E7 to a second lieutenant is a little bit different. But you're kind of on the same track, right? As you're moving from the doer into the management portion, except now everybody makes fun of you because you're a second lieutenant and not a master sergeant.
Well, I purposely took a position outside of directly of combat control. I was an education and training officer, and I went to the Air Force Special Operations School at Hurlburt as an instructor.
Okay.
And they assigned me to unconventional warfare. And that now, as you know, is part of the Joint Special Operations University. But back then, there was no combined or joint. Each service had their own. The Special Forces had the JFK Center. And the Air Force had this school and all the schools up at Maxwell. But, SOCOM did not exist at that time. So, and the Air Force Special Operations Command did not exist at that time. So I was there at a small place called the Air Force Special Operations School, but it was good because they had different various subjects. I got to learn about the joint planning system and realized that if combat control was going to be a player in the military scene to be part of the war plans, then we had to get into the joint documents that were out there, like the Joint Strategic Capabilities Plan and a couple others. So that opened up my eyes and it gave me some good background, and I was able to, do some historic unconventional warfare and guerrilla warfare studies, which I enjoyed. And I ended up, I did in my enlisted career, I did take some special forces operations courses as correspondence courses from JFK Center, which I enjoyed. And so I had a background in it, and I worked in it, when we were working up in Laos. So, foreign internal defense and stuff like that. So it was all good.
You had the taking a step back a little bit, you had the Goldwater-Nichols Act, right? Establishing all this stuff, and SOCOM was blessed off in 87. And it's from somebody who has spent, most of their career, other than, the last 9-10 months in SOCOM, it's amazing to see where it has gone since its inception. Mm-hmm. And, when you talk about the Joint Special Operations University, which has got incredible instructors, incredible courses, that are not your typical, not to hate on Air Force enlisted professional military education, but it is oftentimes misses the mark when it comes to education and what people want and need. Whereas all the feedback and all the courses I've taken from Joint Special Operations University, plus all the feedback that you hear about, because it's not just Joint Special Operations, or it's not just SOCOM people that get to go through it. There are other people that get to go through it. And the feedback is wow, why is other professional military education not like this? And I think it's because it's mission focused and it's people focused as well. And it tries to stay relevant, and it's not, within the confines of Big Blue or Big Air Force or Big Navy or Big Army. So it has the ability to adjust and remain relevant. But aside from JSALU, like taking a step back and looking at SOCOM, like what do you think about that and what it's become?
Well, it was before I answer that directly, let me just set that in 1981, in 1980, we came off of the first attempt, Desert One, and then the second one was Honey Badger that never launched, and then JSOC started there in early 81 with our plank holding unit at that time, Det 1 Makos, but I was not part of that. I was on the prototype BrandX. So now special operations starting to get stronger, really realizing we needed a joint capability. However, the need was still there to evolve to a 4-star unified command level. And between then and 1987, when the Goldwater-Nichols Act was passed, we had a lot of good work done by Congressman Dan Daniel of Virginia, a couple senators, and a lot of other folks behind the scenes, a lot of civilian folks, because remember, the military services, the hierarchy of the military services were against the formation of SOCOM. And I mean, that's all they do it. And it took a lot of advocacy, a lot of challenging. And so having said that, it has paid off tremendously for us. We have a premier capability in the world. And you look back and say, why was it so hard to set this up? It should have been a no-brainer, set it up immediately. But remember, in our typical American way, we have a thing called bureaucracy. And then we have another thing called egos, right? Especially, I guess, the higher up in rank, your ego gets very large. And people did not want to support special operations, and let alone Air Force developing their capability, because that might compete with other capabilities that are out there, So the joint mindset took a while to evolve, and it's there now. It's codified, it's cemented in. But back then it was not. And we fought those stovepipe battles during BrandX days, working with a joint. At that time, the joint, Redcom had that joint communication support element, and they had the only on-the-shelf plan to react to terrorism. And we butted heads all the time on that, because you're not on that list and I'm not on that list, and you're actually from MAC and they're from TAC and all this crap. It was all crap. It's all bureaucrats, okay? And rear echelon guys, rather than the guys that just want to get out there and do it. So again, it's typically American. We look back in the rearview mirror and say, we didn't have to fight those battles. And that's why you had people emerge who had great leadership skills, like a John Koren, like a Dwayne Cassidy, okay? And these people drove it on the Air Force side, and they certainly had that on the Army side with General Shai Meyer and Charlie Beckwith, okay? And same thing on the Navy side with Marsenko. So each command did eventually fight their battles through their respective service, and we ended up with a joint capability. Now, at SOCOM, put in perspective, I think I was the second generation of officers at SOCOM. I succeeded Jeff Buckwelder in the J3 ops job. And so I got there in 91. SOCOM got stood up in 87. And when I got there, the budget was like $3.1 billion. Compared to the other services, that was nothing.
Yeah, that's chump change.
Chump change. And we're still trying to get everybody under one umbrella. And remember, the Marines at that time said, we're special. We don't need to be part of that. Okay.
Yep, already special.
And so it gets down to parochial battles and bureaucracy and things that we somehow get involved with, and then the fighting starts, and it shouldn't have to be that way, right?
Well, I wanted to say, to be fair, like I read a lot of the like Vietnam books and a bunch of other stuff, and if I was an infantry commander and I'm looking at losing my best and brightest to go do special operations. And then like once you like fight that battle and you get over there, and I'm still that commander, and I see my guys fighting to just get into the JSOC SOCOM lists, and they're fighting amongst themselves. I think it's easy to see from that perspective why, like, I wouldn't want to lose my guys, and being able to see down the road how a SOCOM JSOC type entity could help the conventional forces, move them up holistically as well, increase their capability. So, like, I agree that it probably shouldn't have been as hard as it is, but like from that perspective, I was always like, well, it makes sense that I wouldn't want to, like, I don't like it when my guys jump off to go to the other unit. You spend all this time training these guys and they're fantastic people and all they do is leave you. So I think I'm just saying I understand like the egocentric part of it and wanting to hold on to all your talent.
Well, and that's correct. And to that point, we ended up during BrandX days. Remember, we did BrandX from 76 to 80. And we got all centralized at Charleston, but we were coming from all in between 76 and 78. We were coming from different bases, and we had a letter signed by a 2-star at MAC saying that you must support this person, and that this letter we would give the wing commanders. You know what they said? That doesn't mean nothing to me.
Yeah.
Tell me to call somebody, and we'd say okay, and and I was an E6 at the time. We said, okay, call this number. And they would call it, and the 2-star would say, okay, you need to do this. Okay, we'll do it now. You see, and that's another typical reaction. I don't care what you have. Yeah. And I think the Air Force fought it harder than anybody, personally. And now we found some great folks every once in a while, gems that would say, yeah, you got it all. What do you need? Okay. But those were in the minority. So, again, it is bureaucracy. It's the higher good. And sometimes when you're parochial for your unit, it's tough to go and support the higher good. And that's my opinion. But we felt that, and we were involved in those negotiations, if you will. And, when you're going in as an E6, taking on an 06, you don't win many of those. No,
you don't. But, and the sad part about it is that stuff still exists, that, tribalism in terms of, hey, this is our thing and this is what we do. And, you're not taking my guys, or that's mission creep. Like that still happens, even though you have some very, profound leaders out there that are trying to take their organizations or their, they've got a bigger picture and they know what's right. So that still happens. I've completely disrailed us though. So because, if not, we'll just continue on going down, an unorganized path, if you will. But, so your first assignment was, at the schoolhouse or the special operations school. Where did you go after that?
Then I went to the combat control school as a commandant. I had a choice to go to the Air Force. Yeah.
I would say that was very different than it looks now. What was that for you?
Well, I succeeded Bob Holmes. Bob Holmes was there before me. And remember, up until I think about 79, 78, maybe 79, we did not have a officer commandant, if you will. We had a mess sergeant, Charlie McCarthy, Wayne Norred, they ran it. And then the school moved to Pope, and that's when they got some figureheads, because the school was buried under the wing at Pope organizationally. And so when I got there, I succeeded Bob Holmes, and I was one officer and 11 enlisted. And that was it. And we had a little schoolhouse that was just a barn, believe it, that I was able to build up and to get some capability there, as my predecessors did. And then I actually worked for the vice wing commander at Pope. And those guys were good guys because they don't know what they had. I said, okay, you got this schoolhouse, you combat controllers, just don't get in trouble, keep me informed, that type of stuff. And and we did some audacious things with the staff. I had a great staff. I had John Koren as my first NCOIC, who I knew Al from before, way back when. And he's a wonderful human being, and he's my lifelong friend. And then halfway through my tenure, I was there from 1983 to 1987. And then halfway through, Sergeant Rock Steve Horvath came in, and he was my NCOIC, and he was hard as rocks. And but we had instructors there, and I had to get them trained. I've been through academic instructor school. I had a degree in vocational education. Candidly, our lesson plans were on napkins, and legal size note paper, and we had to get a little bit better than that. We have to do a thing called Air Force Instructional System Development. It's all out there. And so I started sending guys to instructor school. And there was some criterion reference instructor school and academic instructor school. All that's good because it's a systematic approach. What are you going to do? What's your objectives? Does it map to your mission? That's the key thing. And are you training them things that they need, or are you training them things that they don't need? Right. And that's what ISD tells you. So it was fun in doing that. We had some congressional investigations because we had a lot of attrition. We got guys in. We had guys that on day one they couldn't do day one PT. We were astounded at that. Now this is before we had, a great pipeline, but we had people show up and they couldn't do day one PT. And by the end of the week, we already knew who would be able to hack it from a PT standpoint. I mean, that's the basic right there. And then we go up there and see if they have anything in their head. So it was a fun time. It was a rewarding time. I had a wonderful staff: Howie Gray, Chris Caffel, just some wonderful Bob Wilkinson, Chief Wilkinson. He got hurt on the IG team later after he left. Mm-hmm. He was there. And I can't remember. It's Billy Howell was there. Steve McCleary. And two of my folks, Steve McCleary and my admin guy, Johnny, I can't think of his last name right now, but I was able to go commission them. And they went through bootstrap and stuff like that. So Mouse Thomas was on the staff. So we had a great entity, and we had some, we put folks through school, and you'll recognize these names: Ralph Humphrey, Chris Larkin, and a whole generation. We had a whole generation that we brought in, and Mouse Ramos, to name a few, and most of those, all of those guys are retired now. And but it was a wonderful time. We were able to get our support, and being working as a vice wing commander, working for them, I was able to get our support over and above the JAT process, for airlift, for training. And so we were able to formalize a lot of things and get better at what we did. And we were out there, include myself. I didn't duck it. I mean, that's one thing. The one lonely officer at that school had to be out there every day with his troops, which I was. And so we were all lean and mean, and we ran through Pope. We ran that 10-miler from Sicily in as a culmination, and it was a good time. Now we fought. I let the guys fight, and then we fought each other. I brought a guy in to teach us some defensive capabilities with full equipment on, and we busted each other up pretty good. Glowacki was one of my instructors. Jack King was one of my instructors, and we beat each other up. It was good.
I mean, that's what happens now. You occasionally, you get some boxing gloves and you got a disagreement with somebody and throw the boxing gloves at them and you got to work it out. And then you're fine afterwards. But it's pretty cool to me listening to you mention names who I know, right? But at the same time, like I look back to my combat control cadre, my instructors, and, Mike LaMonica, Bob Rankin, Jason Dreyer, Jeff Gilmain, Aaron May, Wes Brooks. And I know I'm missing some, which are all great people, all ended up being chiefs, all like chiefs, command chiefs, very well decorated. And just, everybody in the community just kind of knows it's pretty cool because we are such a small community. Nearly everybody does great things. It's pretty cool to see and kind of review that.
Well, two other things from those days as Commandant. And actually, Bob Rankin was one of my students, too. Number one was I would bring all the guys in once a week, and we'd evaluate the students. And I would tell them that if I would throw out everybody you wanted me to throw out, we wouldn't have any students. Okay. So I said, we can't do that. We can't do that. And I always got you're softening the standard argument, in my ear all the time. I went through all of that and okay, what is the standard? Help me understand it. Well, we don't know. We know it, but we don't have it written down. Oh, that's interesting. Yep. You're marching them in from Camp McCall. Is that written down anywhere? No, but we know they need to do that. Oh, that's interesting. We're not going to do that anymore. So we went through that. But we did get our act together. We did get our standards down, okay, because we had to withstand scrutiny. And I brought in guys from the Occupational Measurement Center to take a look at our program and strengthen it. And it was good. So that was one thing. And the other thing is we started bringing in more officers that were selected from other career fields, like Bob Newman, Colonel Newman. Okay, and others. Now, there was no formal officer selection at that time. And I had the folks up on the MAC staff had operational or administrative control of me to a degree. And actually operational control. I had to do what they told me to do. The wing just supported me. And we had a charter that was pretty loose. We do anything that the MAC staff says we have to do. Oh, okay, that's good. And so they said, well, run these officer courses. Okay. And so our instructors were always interested in who is this guy? How can we can't let them in? Well, yes, we can. They're officer candidates and we're going to treat them with respect and we're going to evaluate them. And if they don't hack it, they're going to pack it. We understood that. And we had that. And then, and we had some battles there, believe me, on some of the officers that did not make it. Okay, and I won't name names, but we went through some huge battles on that. And in the summer, we were able to bring in some summer students from the Uniformed Services University of the Health Science because they wanted to come down and see our program, and they were Air Force types and Army types. We said, okay. We had some foreign students come in from Spain and who we met, and we trained them. And actually, those guys, when I was a commander in Europe, I went to go visit them in Spain, and they treated me with great respect. And we have pictures on the wall there in Alcantarilla, Spain. So we did a lot of things at the school for our small capability, and we were very active, and the staff worked hard. And we just had one admin and one supply sergeant, and the rest were combat controllers on the staff, and they were wonderful gems of human beings. They were wonderful. And even though we had disagreements, they were all friends, and we did our best to get them their preferred assignment after they left the school. Because I wanted to continue to move people through the school. We didn't want anybody homesteading there too long, and that was one of the knocks on the school. So we were able to do that. So it was a fun time. But the officer selection process at the last year I was there, we did do a formal selection process because we had the group stand up down at Hurlburt, and we started running the programs for the 720th group.
Jeez, the first one. Like I love the history stuff because I remember so I'm SR, and when we stood up the new career field, I read a ton of combat control history, and what always stuck out to me was the personal capability of the guys on team will always get your foot in the door. But what we don't talk about often is once you have your foot in the door, the paperwork required to professionalize everything to get the keys, right? To all the doors so you can always go through it. And so I'm a nerd, right? But the foundations that you guys put out there and the work that you did, laid down the path for not only your career field, but I read all that stuff. So I understood that your guys will get your foot in the door, but the paperwork and the professionalism and what you do in AATC is what makes the capability stick around, right? Sustainability and professionalize it. And so I'm just blown away by all this. I love it. And I think that's important for people to understand is how you professionalize the force moving forward. And it's not just about, the toughest guys and holding this this vague standard and beating people up if we don't professionalize it. You guys were on the cusp of disappearing for like 30 years, I think, from what I read.
Yeah. Well, I like your analogy. You have the keys so you can continue to walk through that door. That's really excellent. And I can tell you that your predecessor, career field, the combat weather guys, they would come to us and go through our program too. And of course, all our combat control instructors said, we can't have that. They're weather. I said, yes, we can. And we're going to train them and we're going to give them our best. Okay. So we had to get over those parochial humps. We were part of the problem. We had to get through our mindset and our bias and handle that, but we did. And right. You're right. And so we were able to take it to a particular level. And then I was able to hand it off to Dave Thompson. I went through 24th selection in 1986, and I went up there in November of 87 when Colonel Buck was up there. So, so I had over a 4-year run at the Combat Control School, and it was a wonderful experience, one of the best I ever had.
So one more question about your time there. When you all stood up the officer selection, what were the differences that you were looking for between the officers and the enlisted folks? Like, you professionalized what you were looking for in the enlisted folks. What was the difference with the officer selection versus the enlisted guys? Candidly,
we didn't kick their butts hard enough, whereas the enlisted guys, we tore into them. That's just how it is. Okay. And we had to be careful with that. And we did it with respect, but I could see the instructors grumbling on the side, and I wanted to know everything that they had issues with. Some were legitimate, some were not. And the ones that weren't legitimate, we had to get over that. So, we had a little, wasn't a squad attack course. It was like a leadership confidence course. Here's your ropes. You got to get across that stream. How are you going to do it? Put 4 people together and see how they react. And we're there with a clipboard evaluating that type of stuff. So it was good. And I remember Colonel Rodriguez went through. I remember when he went through, and I think a couple of the generals now that are out there might have gone through when I was in my last courses there. And it was fun, and the 720th group ran it, and we reran it for them at Pope, and it was a good initial way, good systematic way of doing a professional selection of officers to come into the career field, and that was good. And so that was the ground basic premise of everything right there, and it's evolved from there as it should. But it was good because we had Fort Bragg, and we still had the meager facility that was there just below the JSOC compound at the time. Right now it's inside the JSOC compound. But we did not have that $17 million school that sits over on the end of the runway at Pope. We had that little Butler building that we had. Nice. Yeah, I know.
No, and I went through that smaller building that's by the 21st. Like, that's where I went through.
Right. Okay.
So it's kind of sad to see it go with the pea gravel pits and I can see.
And my guns out front. My front. Yeah, we got those from Grenada. I won't go into how we did that, but I took a lot of flack. But we were able to keep them there as a monument.
No, it's good. So that's where I went through combat control school.
Good.
And, but their facility now is pretty impressive. It's enormous.
I was there actually this past April because I went up for a Desert One remembrance with Delta, and I stopped by the school, and everybody was out in the field. So all they had was the admin people there. But I knew Ron Brown, who was the Special Forces retired sergeant major, who helped build that along with Jim Lyon and Gene Adcock. And I looked at the displays, and it's wonderful to capture it all. But the administrative females who I met were very courteous. Everybody's jocked up, ready to go to war. Everybody looks good. That was good.
So I'd be remiss, and I don't think we brought him up before, but how we linked up with you, which was Tommy Howard, right?
Absolutely.
Who is this, right? So Tommy Howard, who is the son of Clyde Howard, Senior Master Sergeant Clyde Howard, who was a combat controller It's funny because he just texted me while we were on this and saying, hey, I know you're recording with JK, like looking forward to part 2. But I guess he got a request from Jerry Jones, who I know you know.
I know.
And he and Jerry Jones wanted us to ask you to kind of elaborate on Clyde Howard's influence on combat control.
Oh, sure. And I think I mentioned Clyde a bit in the first time. Well, first of all, Clyde preceded me when I worked up in Laos. Clyde was over there late 60s. And culturally, he probably was one of the guys that could adapt to the Asian environment. And he helped the team members do that. Okay. Plus, coming out of, I think he came out of England or Hurlburt, and they had the 404 program, and they had, we had a combat control team at NKP, and then it moved to Udorn, 70-ish or so. And that was a team that I was on, but Clyde was on the team at NKP, and they worked up in Laos. They did a lot of forward air guide. They did a lot of back seat spotting out of O1s, probably some T-28s. And they were in the aftermath of the butterfly facts. And when the butterfly facts, were kicked out, and those are enlisted combat controllers flying in the back seat. And when General Molmeyer found that out, he goes, no, we're going to have the Ravens come in there. And the Raven pilots, we flew with the Ravens as Clyde helped set that program up along with other folks. Rick Crutchfield was there, Gene Edcock. There was a lot of folks that preceded me. So Clyde was one of those stalwart pioneers that moved that ball forward, and he knew the Asian culture, and he helped us acclimate to it. So his second tour was when I was at Udorn, at the time it was known as Detachment 156 Special Operations Wing, and we were doing the forward air guide training program. So we knew closer air support, okay? And we took him out to the range at Nambu Lampul, and Clyde was very good on that. He knew what he was doing. I flew a couple of long missions on ABCCCs over northern Laos with Clyde. And he held my hand all the way and showed me the ropes. And so he was definitely a pioneer there. There's no question. And we had, we all lived in the same hooch at Udorn because it was air conditioned, because the rest of the detachment didn't have air conditioning. We lived in the alert area. You got to eat food where the alert pilots are eating. That's another side story of everything. And
classic Air Force.
Yeah, and we picked up some Thai language, and we would cuss at each other in Thai and talk to each other in Thai, and we assimilate the whole Thai culture. And Clyde was definitely one that, for a new kid out of Pittsburgh that doesn't know anything about cultures, he was able to open up my eyes and embrace the Thai culture, which is a great culture. Okay. And certainly Tommy was born over there. And so Clyde was definitely a pioneer and helped our team get squared away. There's no question. So he's, too bad couldn't interview him, obviously, or rest in peace. But, I've known Clyde for a long time. We've had battles from enlisted. Enlisted guys go out there and take it around the side every once in a while and go to it. We've done that. Okay. Clyde was a badass. There's no question. But we ended up getting the mission done. And there's some pictures in some of the recently published over the last 5 years Forward Air Guide books of me and Clyde up on Plain of Jars in late 72, working with our Forward Air guys. And they're iconic, and they're in the history books. So I had a good time with Clyde. He knew what he's doing. And then eventually, when he was at Hurlburt, and we were part of BrandX, we'd all come together. And of course, then we had that, who's going to control the gunship, and who's going to do this, and who's going to do that. And we're from TAC, and we're soft, and you guys are MAC, but we're actually prototype BrandX. We went through those wars.
Yeah.
But we worked through that. And Clyde was part of that. And I know on some of the early BrandX missions, Clyde was there. I got a picture of him sitting with Jim Howell and Jim Keene and John Koren, and we had 26 guys there. Mike Steinbeck was in that pic, Mitch Bryan, and they all contributed to building BrandX. So Clyde was part of that too in the early days.
Jeez, it's incredible how many people it takes to create what we enjoy today as just what it is. And so I guess you all those lessons you eventually, I think we left off on you heading to the other side of the fence and the next selection course. And what was that like getting up there? And like as coming from like the educational side, did you have any? This is a weird question. Do you have any gripes about the selection course or anything that they put you through to get to the other side of the fence?
No, I didn't, because I was older at that time. I went through selection in '86. I was 35, but I still could hack it. And I remember Steve Horvath told me, he said, "Just pace yourself." I said, "Okay." So, and actually, Chief Lampy was running selection and training at that time, and so I knew they were going to pull out all the stops on me, and so I just kept my head down. And I remember that particular course. It was during April of '86. And we started out warm and ended up freezing up in the mountains. And but we hacked it, and I picked up some tips. I ended up running selection eventually as one of my jobs. And then Colonel Tapero was the commander of the unit at that time. And I did pass selection, but I had a small disagreement with Colonel Tapero at the time. I won't go into particulars. And so I went back down to school, and so I'm going, okay, well, I passed through selection, but I didn't get selected. Okay. So I just hacked it there. And when there was a change of commanders there, and I was still looking for a job, because I was going to go to Air Force Academy because I was offered an Air Officer commanding slot. Colonel Buck said, "Why don't you come up and first be selection and training, then be my DO?" I said, "Okay." And I did that. So I went up there, and I had Craig Rith was on the staff along with Jeff Buckmiller, and then I joined him. And we were still small. I think we only had 56, And then Colonel Buck got involved with the manpower study. I helped do that along with John Glowacki, who eventually was my former instructor, and then he was in manpower, and John worked on that, and I worked on that. And that one got us up to 212. And I remember General Downey says, "Well, you'll never fill them." And General Downey and I knew, since he was a major during BrandX days, and we think we can do this. And that's another story of that unit evolving from the early days of BrandX to the initial Det 1 Makos plank handlers or plank holders, and then moving and evolving and growing and doing good stuff along the way and getting notoriety and support. And so we just took it further. And so my two commanders were Colonel John Buck and Colonel Craig Brochie. And Colonel Brochie was one of the best organizational commanders I've ever worked for, because he knew the system, and he would kick my butt, and then the next moment he'd pat me in the butt and said, "Well, go do this and go do that." And I enjoyed working for him. And he was a big guy too. They're both big guys, Colonel Buck and Colonel Brochie. And so we went through those days, and of course we did Panama, and that was very successful for us. And we did the beginnings, the ISP RST program. Okay, we did a lot there, and we outgrew the facilities that JSOC gave us. And now it's enormous, but back then they went from the trailers to the big buildings. So when I got up there, I was in the big buildings.
Okay. So it wasn't necessarily like ground floor. It just seems like your entire career, like everywhere you stepped, like everything was growth, right? Like nothing was settled. It was like, oh, bring in JK to help us fix this. No. Come run selection again. And I mean, it was a whole group of y'all. Like, yeah. I don't think anybody in your generation ever just had an assignment where you just show up and just do your job.
That's good. You're absolutely correct. Existed. I'm just indicative what everybody else did as well. They all had different sections. Like the survey program grew up. John Bringoff did a good job on that, and D.I. Brown. And that's when we started getting the new computers in at that time, from 87 to 91. And we had a bucket of money from Special Air Force programs. I won't tell you the name, but so we were well resourced. But at the same time, we had to account for it and make sure we weren't wasting it, but we put the teams together and organizationally, and but it certainly wasn't me. I just represent other people that were thrown into those positions. Believe me, just another guy trying to hack it. That's all.
So right around that time, is that when the whole survey program kind of started, at SOCOM, or was it kind of a thing beforehand? And now and I know that we can't get too far into it because of classifications and stuff like that, but so you guys were already doing that kind of stuff.
We were already doing it there at that command, and SOCOM followed post 88 onward. When Jim Boyce was down there, and I think Pat Rogers was on there, and then they really brought that to the next level, right? But no, we built that capability, and then of course JSOC embraced that, and we did good stuff there.
Yeah, that's those guys are busy doing that. And it's not just CCTs, because it's not just I got to be careful here, but like it is much larger than just, hey, I'm going to do a drop zone survey or an HLZ survey. Like there's a lot more to it, which is why it's a larger team, but they are very busy. I'll just say that.
Yeah, we had courageous guys go into harm's way, sometimes by themselves, sometimes in 2-person teams. And they did a good job, and they came back. And of course, we got them special training to accommodate those situations with the level C SEER and all of that. And we started working with the folks up at Fairchild. We did a lot of exercises up there, and we were proud of what we did there. So, and we worked with other entities as well that gave us better skills. So it was all good in those days, and that was a wonderful operational assignment.
Well, I don't want to make a point here. So we're coming out of like 20 years of GWAT. So like we have these young guys coming in and getting on team, and we get these questions a lot, like during, so-called peacetime, relative peacetime, whatever, like, am I going to be working? And like you guys kind of lived through all this stuff, and we're trying to like shy away from saying certain things, but it's just always nice to tell these guys like, hey, like there's no such thing as no work to do. You know what I mean? And you kind of lived through all those days before, 9/11 and in between wars and all that other stuff. Can you speak to that a little bit as much as you can?
Well, there was a time post-Vietnam, where all the operations going on. Of course, special operations been very active and proactive, and especially how it built up in the 80s and then with SOCOM. So there's always something to do. And we had parochial battles, as you have mentioned before. We fought with the blue machine, and we call the big green machine. Okay. Yep. Who's going to do what, when, but we worked that. We were outgunned sometime, where, I was at that time a captain. I'd go into a planning conference, and I'd have maybe an E6 with me, and then the Army shows up, of course, with a minimum of an 06 with a command sergeant major. Okay. We wrote the first, I think, Ranger or special tactics input to the Ranger SOSOP, Special Operations Standard Operating Procedures. And there was missions going on that we were part of, and we were selected to do those, and based upon our capability and our competence. And if we had the capacity to support that as well, that's another thing. Do we have the capability, and do we have the capacity to support? So that is always there, and that's decided, again, in a structured way with the staff. If you're in a theater, you're working for the theater SOCs. And and this is the brilliance of SOCOM, eventually they got those theater SOCs standardized, right? And you have combat control officers running that. You got other special tactics officers running that, and that's wonderful. And then they do the planning, they do, the crisis action planning, and they do the deliberate planning as well. And then if you're part of that, and they bring you in. And that happened to me when I was a commander in Europe, where we'd be put on missions and as part of, the deliberate planning process. And now it goes into crisis action, where you got to plan that out. So yes, there's opportunity, special operations. especially in special operations, excuse me. And I don't see that ever stopping, because even if the big major wars open up, there's always going to be a special operations capability to support that.
Now I've got to unmute myself here. Just so I'm not coughing on the thing. So I kind of alluded to it before we started recording. And I the Air Force right now is got a big push for multi-capable airmen, agile combat employment, or ACE. And I do find it funny because it's good that the Air Force is doing this with the MCA and the ACE contract. Like this is all good. So this is not me, throwing the Air Force under the bus, but special tactics and SOCOM, but special tactics in particular has been doing MCA and ACE since its inception. Like you guys were doing ACE in Korea. We talked about it on part 1 where you guys were in Korea, landing on beaches during low tide, staying there for a little while until it starts to get shelled. You guys would take off and you can land at a completely different location to conduct operations. And I don't know about you, like back then I would have to imagine that's probably not a big deal for you guys. Like you're like, yeah, of course we would. Why would we stay in one place and get shelled? But now like it's some big, like, oh my gosh, we're going to do this. And I think I want to get your take on it, but I think it's a result from 20 years of GY where everything is on a full FMV. Everybody can see it. We've got, kill TV on the jocks where it's just TVs everywhere from all these different sensors, and everybody's got to have eyes on, instead of that whole kind of mission command. I trust you, whether you're an officer or an enlisted, I trust you to go out and do the right thing and execute the mission to the best possible way, best possible intent. So I'm curious how that worked out for you guys and your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the guys in the rear with the gear need to support the troops out front. And there's probably opens up the micromanagement. We can see real time things going down. They have to avoid getting involved. You have to trust the leadership on the battlefield. You got to trust the operators. Okay. And they'll report back. Don't call them 10 times in 5 minutes for a sit rep. Give us a break. Right? Yeah. Don't be the first one to run to the general and say, well, that plane took off at 0240 local. Give it a break. So I think another thing is that the training system we had at Air Force Special Operations Command right now is wonderful. I think that when the Air Force is looking, this is my opinion, and takes people out of personnel or to life support, and they jock them up, and then they say you're going to be part of this contingency force. I don't think they have the depth of experience or training to, you got to watch where you put them in harm's way. You can take them to the FSB, but you're actually going to take them into the AO, and on a mission with highly trained operators. And everybody wants to get there, but really, are they highly trained? And I think you all have a magnificent system right now that can hold its water with any system out there in special operations. It's wonderful. Bringing other Air Force elements in there just because there's more of them or they have some specialties, I have to look hard at that. But if you end up bringing other folks into the war in a combat area, you got to rely on them. And I don't know their depth of background, and certainly the people that's overseeing you and watching you with the big eye have to understand the type of mission you're on and understand how your task organized to conduct that mission. And they have to understand the mission scenario as well. So that's about all I got to say on that. It's a little bit tougher now for you all because you do have the bigger eye. All we had was communications, and we could always say, well, this HF radio is not working too good right now, or I don't have SATCOM.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. Well,
No.
I mean, but if talking to you, talking to Mike Lampy, talking to Wayne Norad, everything you guys did was, under the multi-capable airman, right? Never did you guys go, that's not my job. Like, hey, we need you to go sit in the back of an O1. No, that's not my job. That was never a thing. You did what needed to be done. Like I remember, Lampy was talking about doing some kind of UXO disposal. I can't remember where they were loading bombs or unloading bombs, and there were some UXOs, and it was just like he's telling us this story, and it's like, are you kidding me right now? EOD wasn't around, and he's like, no, it just needed to be done. And there are guys back there taking bets on if they live through it or not, because if they detonate the explosive, and it's like there was never a question of like, oh, well, somebody else will do it because this isn't my job. You guys did what needed to be done because it was the right thing to do, and it got the mission accomplished. Like I think we lost that for a little while, and I think we're getting it back as a DoD, not special tactics. I think we inherently do that. We whether it's jump onto an airfield, or we're going out and doing surveys, or we're doing a personnel recovery, or we're doing recce on something. Like there's never a, well, hey, I'm an SR guy. I'm not touching that radio to go do this. There's never that. And you guys embodied that. Well,
that's the Air Commando spirit from way back when, and especially in Laos in the 60s as that evolved. And the Special Air Warfare Center, when it started in Jungle Gym, when it started in 61. So that was their attitude and the way they operated. And they had less bureaucracy back then. They had worse equipment, but they did a lot of things with what they had. It was pretty amazing. So you're absolutely correct. And that goes on today. And that's the attitude we need.
Yep. Well, I mean, one of my favorite words that you've used on here today is proactive, right? And I think that just like sums up everything. We have people that want to step into, like, we get all these questions, like, when I get there, what am I going to be doing? And it's like, wait, we went through this selection process, which I believe is more of a discovery process than it is like building people. You discover these people that have that grit, determination, the never quit attitude, that are going to solve these problems no matter what. Like, you're not stepping into a job that's like prescripted for you. It's not scripted out the way it's going to happen. We're going to throw you into a location, and you got to use what's between your ears and all your capability and everything else that we've baked into you and solve problems. Like that's the job. That's, that's what it always was to me. And I love that you said that proactive thing. Cause that you're right. That mindset is what makes us, one of the things I think that makes the Air Force special. That, and you mentioned being outgunned all the time, like we kind of have that little brother syndrome sometimes, cause we're always outgunned by the big green machine and the other ones. And so like that proactive attitude, and being outgunned a little bit and having to prove ourselves over and over again, I think it is what makes the community special.
Well, you have a lot more senior officers now in Air Force Special Warfare, and that's good. That's a good thing, and I hope they use them wisely and fight those bureaucratic battles, and while still staying attached with the troops, because they have to understand that and go through that, and so I think that's an improvement. The money is always there, and the equipages and the facilities, those are all improvements, but that prepares the operator to do their job. And the job may not be what they were trained to do. It may be something else. Like you said about Mike Lampy. By the way, that was at Longchen. He was talking about that when he was on Project 404. A little bit before, he was there a little bit before me, but he did a wonderful job there. And then he came back to our team at Udorn. And by the way, Jerry Jones is a friend of mine too. I haven't talked to him for a long time, but we were in the Philippines together. So,
well, he's alive and well, because he's been going back and forth with Tommy Howard and asking to ask you and Lampy and Wayne NORAD things. So he's definitely watching or listening.
Nice. All right. Well, so I think we're getting close to an hour. So after the SMU, a quick overview, kind of like, where did you go from there? And do we need to come on here and do a part 3? I guess are my big questions.
You don't need a part 3 with me. No, I did. I went on the SOCOM staff in 91. So Chief Lampy was already on the staff. He left 24th. And then I was a J3 officer. Like I said, I replaced Jeff Buckmelder. So I was made major down there, and it was good. It was a joint J3 operations staff. And that was just when all the colonels were losing their secretaries. So now they had to read email. And so they got the staff officers to do all that stuff for them. And that was interesting, the second generation at SOCOM and how that evolved. But it was good. So General Steiner was there for the first couple of years, and then General Downing. And then I was part of I was a plank holder on the command parachute team down there at SOCOM. So, and that was a good thing. We did a lot of practice on the weekends, and then we did demonstrations throughout Florida and in stadiums and stuff like that. So that was a good time I spent there. I went from there to Staff College for a year. And then I went over to, took the 321st Squadron from 94 to 96. I was promoted Lieutenant Colonel, but I was on the very bottom of the list because I was early to major. I never put Lieutenant Colonel on. And then after 27 years, I decided to fold the tent and get out.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the things that we talk about is guys leave the community, but they never leave. And I think you embody that in a lot of ways. If you want to, can you just like go over kind of like what you do now and all the other things that you've done since you put the uniform down?
Well, I try to stay connected. I obviously support the Combat Control Association and Foundation. I'm an ambassador for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation because that started during Desert One. And Steve McCleary and John Koren built that. And now, after they handed it over to Clay Hutmucker and Sean Corrigan, it's a premier top-of-the-line charity, which I'm proud to serve. And I do pro bono support. Yes, actually, yesterday I received a $20,000 check from a private construction company in North Texas that raised money for us. And so I do what I can for a very noble cause there, because sending children to college, if their father or mother passes on active duty, then that's a great thing, and they have a great record, and it's my charity as well. And I work full time. I'm a program and project consultant, a project management consultant. And I got all the project management certifications, and I make a living doing that. I'm currently at Cook Children's Hospital System in Fort Worth, Texas, and I have a good gig there, good ride. But I stay in touch. I can't go to every reunion, but I do, and I'm happy to see the folks. I had a wonderful career in the Air Force. I grew up in the Air Force to a degree, and I had a great ride. So, and combat control evolved while I was there into special tactics. What a great time that was. And now to look where it's all at is just, it's wonderful. And your podcast keeps me appraised of what's going on. So I've looked at your podcast, and that's great. And I appreciate the job you guys are doing in interviewing old heads, but younger heads too, because we're all part of it. So that's good.
Yeah, well, we're just standing on the shoulders of giants like yourself and everybody that was there with you. So, last thing, I mean, you had like a pretty amazing career. If there were like 13 to 17-year-olds out there thinking about joining up, and I'm sure you did this last time, any advice or any final words that you would give them if they're thinking about joining this community?
Well, I think we need leaders here. The services need to get, one of two graduating seniors, and they're not getting their recruiting goals. And I think the system set up in Air Force Special Warfare, where you have that LLC that helps PT them and prepare them and give them diet advice, and that's your main job in life, is just get strong. I think that's wonderful, and that's it, and that's great. I think that if folks have opportunity to go to college, get your education, come back as a leader. If you don't have that opportunity to go to college, you want to come in enlisted for whatever, that's fine, come enlisted. But you're part of the force, participate in it and grow and learn. And because that's what I did, but I had a lot of good NCOs kick me in the butt because and so I needed that too. So that's how I feel. I think the system's good, but the systems need more leaders, because we need more warriors out there, because we're going to be fighting wars on behalf of America in the future. We're always going to be doing that. And that's why we need good troops, both enlisted and officer, do their job, do it well, and go from there.
JK, it was a pleasure having you on, and a true honor. So I appreciate everybody listening. Go ahead, like, subscribe, and leave us some comments. And thank you so much again. And we're out here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.